Hey, welcome to my channel, Self Help Nation. I am Lawrence Divine. Thank you for sharing your time, either your day or your evening, with me to listen to or watch my content. I do count it a privilege, and I definitely want to make use of your time and use your time very efficiently. I am a certified life coach, and my purpose is to help you find your purpose and help you take control of your self-development, one conscious thought at a time. Now, today I'm going to talk about a controversial issue, something that's been placed on my heart to discuss. And today we're talking about domestic, verbal, and sexual abuse, particularly as it relates to the Black community. And so I wanted to cover this topic because it's prevalent in our community, and it's a very pressing issue that most people don't tend to talk about. I want to talk about it from a biblical perspective, and I want to give you some research that backs up what I'm saying in the video. I want to try to keep this video at about 10 minutes or so, well, under 15 minutes. So let's take a look at it. The subject of domestic, verbal, and sexual abuse. Now, men and women are both domestic and verbal abusers. And sometimes sexual abuse is a component of an overall environment of domestic or verbal abuse. So now, from a biblical perspective, let's look at Proverbs 25 and 24. And then we're going to go to Psalms 11 and 5. Now, Proverbs 25 and 24 says, "It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house." Okay, let's go over to Psalms 11 and 5, and this could apply to specifically maybe to men. "The Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth." Let's go back to Proverbs 25:24 and read it one more time and just give you a couple words, and then we're going to move on. "It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman." Now, the word brawling in Hebrew simply means a contentious woman. Now, the word contentious means to be disagreeable, argumentative. So what the Bible is saying, it is better to be on the rooftop, on the corner of a rooftop, than to be in a huge house with a argumentative or contentious or disagreeable woman. Now let's go over to Psalms 11 and 5. "The Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth." Now, the word wicked is immoral. The phrase loveth means to have an affection for. And the word violence means ill treatment, to violate, hurt someone, or damage something. So what this Bible verse is saying in Psalms 11 and 5, "The Lord trieth the righteous, but the immoral and he who has an affection for hurting others, damaging property, ill treatment, God said, I hate his soul." So now that we've covered those two Bible verses, let me get you some stats. Let me read you some stats. Black women experience rates of domestic violence and sexual violence at 2.5 times more often than other ethnic groups. In fact, they're 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than white women. In most of these cases, 92%, the person who killed them knew their victim. In addition, 56% of these homicides are committed by a current or former partner. That means that Black women have a 2.5 higher rate of being killed by their life partners, spouse, husbands, boyfriends. However, there are statistics about women as well. Studies show that women commit domestic violence acts as well. A recent study by Harvard Medical School conducted a survey of over 11,000 men and women and found that 50% of the violence was reciprocal. That means that both the male and the female took responsibility and took responsibility for the domestic violence, and they were both equally violent in a time of passion, in the heat of passion. So let's just quickly summarize. What we're talking about is God's perspective on a contentious woman and God's perspective on a violent man. God says that it is better that a person be on the edge of a rooftop on top of a house than to be in a huge house with an argumentative and combative and disagreeable woman. But he also says in Psalms 11:5 that he hates the man who has an affection for ill treatment, damaging, hurting, committing violence upon people. Now, we also talked about the stats, but let me give you 5 signs that you may be experiencing domestic violence in your relationship. 5 signs. 1, they call you names, insult you, or put you down. 2, threaten you with violence or a weapon. 3, hit, kick, shove, slap, choke, or otherwise hurt you or your children or pets. 4, force you to have sex or engage in sexual acts against your will. 5, blame you for his or her violent behavior, tells you that you deserve it. So these are 5 signs that you may be experiencing domestic violence. Now, we know that domestic violence, verbal abuse, and all of this is not your best life. It is not part of God's plan for you. But just because you're not violent, some of us say, oh, I'm not violent, but you're violent with your words. So we have to watch the way we speak to each other. And we need to understand that that's also contributing to the environment where domestic violence and verbal abuse can take place, even sexual violence. So we have to watch the language. And usually what will happen is the language starts before the behavior. So in many instances, people don't never just jump from being quiet to just all out sexual or domestic violence. Usually there is some words being said prior to getting to the actual act. So we have to be cognizant of our words. Okay. Now, how do we break the cycle of domestic and verbal and sexual abuse? Number 1, recognize that this is not your best life. Recognize that you're better than that. Recognize that this is not God's plan for you, and recognize that you're not being an example to your children when you're acting this way. So we don't teach our children by what we say. We teach our children by what we do in front of them. Now, all of us have been guilty of some type of abuse, maybe in the past, whether it was verbal or physical. But this is not God's example of the way we're supposed to be living, and it's not your best life. It's not the best person, the part of you. So breaking the cycle, you no longer have to stay in an abusive relationship for the greater emotional and physical toll. It takes a toll over you. If you've been in each relationship for a period of time where somebody doesn't appreciate you, not treating you the way you need to be treated, not providing for you, is physically or verbally abusive towards you. This is something that we don't talk about in the greater community, especially in the Black community. We hide it. We don't talk about the issue. We think by not talking about it, it'll go away, but we all may or may not have experienced it. So consider taking these precautions about breaking the cycle, calling a women's shelter or domestic violence hotline for advice. Make the call at a safe time when the abuser isn't around, or from a friend's or house or safe location. Pack an emergency bag that includes items you need when you leave, such as extra clothes or keys. Leave the bag in a safe place. Keep important personal papers, money and prescriptions, medications handy. So if you have to leave, you can take those items with you. And then where to seek help. Emergency is 911 or your local emergency number or law enforcement agency. I hate to get to this point, but if somebody is physically abusive, sexually abusive towards you, you do not have to take that. You do not have to suffer in silence. You do not have to feel like, you're telling on somebody, but we all are responsible for our own behaviors. And so, talk to someone you trust, turn to a friend, a loved one, a neighbor, a coworker, or even a religious advisor for support. And finally, you can also call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233. You can call the hotline for intervention. You can also talk to your healthcare provider as well. And so what we want to do is sort of recap. We at that 11-minute mark, and I just want to recap today. This is a very serious subject. I was glad to talk about this. I'm hoping that it will help somebody. Number one is that nobody deserves to be abused. Nobody deserves to be abused, whether it's physical, sexual, or verbal abuse. You don't deserve it. Number two, people do to you what you allow them to do. So if you tolerate the behavior, it's going to continue. And you have to set boundaries early in your relationships against this type of behavior. So let us recap shortly. We looked at the Bible's perspective. We looked at Proverbs 25 and 24, where the Bible talks about a contentious woman who is a argumentative or combative or a brawling woman, how it's better to be on the housetop in a corner than to be in a White House. And then we also talked about Psalms 11 and 5, where he talks about the man who has an affection to be violent, to hurt other people, to be immoral, to not care about people. And then we looked at the stats that talked about how black women are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than white women. We talked about that 92% in these cases are people who were a current or former lover or partner. We also talked about that there was a Harvard study that showed 11,000 people were interviewed, and 50% of the people, both men and women, admitted to contributing to domestic violence. And then we talked about the five signs that you may be experiencing abuse: name calling, threatening violence, physical assaults, forcing you to have sexual behaviors against your will, and blaming you for the things. We also talked about breaking the cycle, of abuse, being ready, having some clothes or certain key items ready in case you have to leave. Also talking to your family, friends, co-workers, spiritual advisors, pastors. And also we talked about 911 in cases of emergency. And finally, we gave you the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. That number again is 1-800-799-7233. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching my content. Take care. God bless. Yo.